Michail Antonio has come back into the side recently and, in my opinion, has been absolutely killing it. But my opinion doesn't matter. I am a stupid boy. Thankfully, I have a smart one next to me. It's Jack Alderton, co-founder of Analytics United, West Ham Tactics writer, co-host of the West Ham Breakdown. Firstly, Jack, how are you?
And well, you've built me up way too much in this intro, so I'm looking forward to falling below the high expectations you've set.
That's what I do. Listen, usually I build my own expectations too high and then fall well short. Now I thought I'd spread it out amongst the people, let them know that everyone, that's all in my opinion. I think Jack's great, and hopefully you will too. But Jack, we've been doing questions over the course of the international break on the Patreon show, Hamalytics, that we do together. All suggested by you people, patrons, and then we also got some cheeky ones from the YouTube community tab. That's what it's called, the YouTube community tab as well, which we'll be getting onto. But today's video specifically, Michail Antonio, and the question comes from one Adam Finn. How crucial has Michail Antonio been in the last few games? A deeper dive on this would be great. Would like to hear what you guys think would come in the summer as his long-term replacement. Gyökeres makes the trick there, would now cost us many times more. Jimenez, if we're going to get Slot, why not bring in his centre forward too? I mean, we'll start, I guess, by just talking about Michail Antonio in general, because he has come back into the side and has looked, if not back to his best, something close to it. He's looked really, really good since he's come back.
I think he's been sort of back to the best of what we can expect from him at this point in his career, right? And that's really pleasing. A big part of being able to continue to extract that is going to be managing his minutes well. And I think there's been positive signs on that front recently, with him being brought off reasonable times in recent games. I think that's going to be super, super important. Glad to see that he didn't go away with Jamaica, I believe, and stayed back, which has probably been one of the problems in the past. And one of the injury he picked up this season was on international duty, right? So yeah, in terms of beyond that, sort of what he is to us, I think he's crucial and has been for a very long time. I think the biggest frustration at West Ham, or one of the biggest frustrations, because there's often many, has been our lack of energy over finding a replacement for what he does for the team. We have signed strikers, not as many as I think a lot of fans would like, and possibly not as many as I would have liked us to sign. But they haven't been Antonio style strikers. They've been very much plan B, or for us to be able to play another way kind of strikers. And Scamacca and Ings both very obviously not of the style of striker that Antonio is. And we've asked a lot of him really to shoulder that role over the last few years. He's done a great job of it. Bowen has tried its best to replicate some of what Antonio is able to bring to the team. It's quite important when you're looking for your striker to be a clear focal point on counters, especially in the way that Moyes sets us up, for that player to be comfortable moving out into the wide spaces and for them to be a very strong carrier, covering lots of distance and then holding the ball up to allow other people to catch up and get forward and assist in scoring as quickly as possible, really, because our possessions are all about getting shots off as quickly as we can as soon as we win the ball back. In a lot of the time, not all of the time, we don't always play like that, but a lot of the time we do. And that's when Antonio is at his most crucial. I think what we're seeing now is just the difference that Antonio can bring in terms of his hold up and the space that he can then provide for others, really. He's not necessarily the most excellent hold-up striker in the league, but with his physical presence, he is able to win space. Even if he doesn't necessarily win first contact, he'll try and affect that first contact, and then we can really go and try and win the second ball. Either, he will hold it up himself, or he'll try and give an opportunity to someone like Paqueta or Souček or Alvarez to make a tackle and set us going forward, or Ward-Prowse if he's on the pitch as well. So, yeah, a super important player, someone I absolutely adore, and I'm glad he's going to play. Looks like he's going to play a key role in what's left of the season, and I hope that that makes it clear that we would be better placed if we invested in someone who has a similar skill set going forward.
Yeah, I mean, he's thankfully come back at the time we need him most.
Yeah.
It's a huge moment for him, and I think as much as you mentioned Jarrod Bowen, like as much as he's done what he can do, there are some games where it does suit him and he does a job where you're like, he's done a really good job there. A lot of the time you see it and it's just not working. And that's sort of no fault of his. Like, he comes in, he does as much as he can, he works as hard as he can. Like, that guy is tireless. We spoke about it, I think, last week on Analytics on the Patreon, but like, you'll see him go to try and go press. The ball get passed around him relatively easy because no one else really follows him in the press. And you see him sort of going, and then he'll just do that for 90 more minutes. It's kind of crazy. I don't really understand how he manages it, but he does. But just Michail Antonio, some of the things he does, like you say, the hold up play specifically, and there's other parts of just the, I don't know, the sheer danger he brings. What was it used to call him? Vortex of chaos. That's what I used to hear on your shows with Cal quite a lot. It's just vortex of chaos, and it's that idea of just like, there was I can't remember what game it was, one of the recent ones. The ball gets played forward towards him, and it's high up in the air, and it's nothing. It's a nothing ball for anyone to do anything with. And he just runs, it crosses, it comes across, it's coming down to the defender. He runs across the defender's viewpoint, jumps up in the air, heads it forward, and then just runs onto the end of it, and then takes it past his man. I'm like, how are you? This is just stuff that like, and Jarrod Bowen's good, but it's just stuff he just doesn't do. And I think Michail Antonio has this like, whether for good or for bad, I don't know if Antonio sometimes knows his own limitations. I think he's just like, yeah, screw it, I'm going to go for this. And times like that, it just works out. You're like, flipping heck, man. And that's you can see the panic in defenders.
Absolutely, and that's the attitude that Moyes really needs from his strikers. That kind of willingness to go and fight for absolutely everything out of possession and in possession. You want your striker to try and carry as directly as possible up the pitch, as often as possible, really, to challenge for every ball and to chase every ball. We might not press intensely very often as a whole team, but it's very important that the striker and often the number 10 put a lot of work in to make sure that moving the ball forward for the opposition isn't too easy, because that can create matches, and we've all seen it at times where we end up camped too deep for too long. So it's the work that really the striker and the 10 do that's absolutely crucial to stopping those periods of sustained pressure from lasting too long, really, for the opposition, or for it to be too easy for them to progress into those positions. I think just briefly on Bowen playing up front, I think that does work. I think the flexibility of the three with Bowen, Kudus, and Paqueta can be really useful if you're looking at centre backs where you want to draw them out of position or create situations where they're exposed on the outside. That can be really useful. We saw that, for example, against Wolves, where we created lots of situations where Dawson was left defending outside space on the right flank for us. And that was really useful, and we were able to do that by having a three that rotated really regularly and interchanging their positions, and also actually making in-game tweaks to put Paqueta through the middle at one point where he caused a lot of problems. And further to that, I think there's a point at which really, if we were going to continue to play in the way that we do now under David Moyes, I think having an Antonio style striker and a false nine style sort of in what Scamacca was probably meant to be kind of striker would be the best kind of blend to be able to move between the two systems. But then against teams where you want to pin defenders back and upset them physically, and particularly in games in Europe, Antonio is absolutely the number one option, and clearly is well ahead of anyone else at being able to assist us in being a really effective counter-attacking team.
And it means that him coming into the team means people like Bowen can go back into right wing slot where he is
he's
so
outstanding.
good. And you've seen just how like effective he can be in that. And it's that added benefit of it's not just you upgrade a little bit from Bowen to Antonio in the striker position, but you also go, right, here's a right winger. Like Kudus has started against what I thought was possible, has started to look like he's really can do stuff on the left wing that I never thought would happen. Paqueta moving into the centre, or even Paqueta on the left, Kudus in the centre, making different types of runs, even sometimes putting like Kudus on the right. I mean, it just gives you those options, and I think like those three you were talking about, Sans Antonio, being able to sort of rotate and do different bits and pieces, you can kind of also add Antonio into that because he can kind of play a lot of those roles as well. And it's just useful for us to have. I mean, it's at the beginning of the season when we were doing so well and we were like winning comfortably and doing on a really nice run, we did have that sort of flexibility of Kudus wasn't playing every sort of game. It wasn't that stressful for us. He was coming in as sort of a guy who could come in and make an impact, and over time would get into that team. And now he's in that team, and all of a sudden we have these options and we can move and switch things around with European games coming up that are going to be huge against Leverkusen and stuff like that. It's kind of the perfect time for all those things to happen. It's just nice to see. I mean, I sort of forgot because it's, you know, been so long without seeing him that I always think, oh, Jarrod Bowen, he's doing a good job. And he was doing a good job. But all of a sudden, Antonio comes in and goes, oh, yeah, no, yeah. That's what it was. Even without banging in goals every single game like he was in that insane run back in the day. Like, still just so effective.
Well, regardless of his goal scoring output, he has always been a really strong facilitator for us. He creates space for other people, and he does that incredibly well, and gets us from A to B. And a lot of the time beforehand, even when he was scoring really well, what he was doing was drifting to the left, drawing centre backs across, setting the ball back for someone like Fornals, and then he was leaving Bowen in countless 1v1s game after game after game, which was allowing Bowen to rack up the goal totals that he was getting. So we hopefully will be able to see some of that stuff in what's left of the season. Maybe one of the question marks over Kudus is, although he has shown that he can drive on the inside off the left, which was a big concern, whether he would end up driving on the outside when playing on the left, and therefore upsetting the balance a little bit, because we want our wingers to come inside as much as possible, especially to get people like Emerson into the game high up the pitch. Soufal's been very good as well in terms of providing high up the pitch on the right-hand side this season. He's done that well. One of the questions, though, is when he does get into those central areas, is he comfortable in those shooting positions on the left-hand side, and also in terms of his delivery and his decision-making. We have seen a few situations where he gets a little bit lost, and then cross hits the first man, or the cross isn't particularly thoughtful. It's just a ball into an area in the box, where on the right side it's so comfortable, it comes so naturally to him. He knows exactly what he wants to do all the time. So hopefully we can see that develop in what's left of the season, so we get a really effective Kudus as well.
Then let's shift it to the future then, in the second half of the question. I mean, this is the big thing about Michail Antonio. As impactful as he is now, it is very much a now thing, and in the future his age is catching up to him. He went for a long time without any significant injuries. Now he's back in that injury mold, and hopefully not in the same way he was, but still it's happening. We've always needed someone to play at least second fiddle to him, if not be the upgrade on him regardless. It feels like now is just as pressing as it's ever been. A couple of names mentioned there, like Gyökeres, obviously, who's moved to, was it Sporting?
Yep.
Sporting? Absolutely killing the game. Jimenez, someone we've been linked with. We did a video, I think me and you actually, we did a video relatively recently during January about that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Who are the sort of people that you have sort of been keeping an eye on as that Antonio Mark II kind of guy?
We've had a couple of names. I think two of the guys who we've been keeping very close tabs on, and I should credit really Cal for this work, WHU_analytics on Twitter, who does most of our kind of European and international, mostly European, but European and international. He does a lot of South American scouting as well, actually. For us at AU, I'm mostly on the West Ham side of things, so I'm parroting stuff that Cal tells me, really, rather than first-hand knowledge. Although I do have some on a couple of these players, because I did put some work in before. We did a podcast on this, which you can listen to on Spotify. If you scroll back through our catalogue, there's a full podcast on Antonio replacements, if you want this in as much detail as possible. But Adams at Montpellier is one of the names that we've been quite hot on. And for me, the number one and most obvious target is Brian Brobby at Ajax. I think he has that blend of carrying, of hold-up ability, and also is actually really pretty lethal in the box to be the perfect kind of striker for us. In terms of the other names that are often mentioned, Jimenez is one of them. I've seen Xerxes mentioned a lot as well. I think really you can put strikers, or the strikers I've looked at, into almost two separate camps. One of which where I see players that are very creative and skillful at evading contact with the centre backs, finding space away from defenders to then be impactful. And one of which where you have strikers that really target contact with centre backs, want the contact with centre backs, and are able to dominate that contact. And whilst I think that Xerxes and Jimenez are both brilliant players and are both going to do really, really incredible things in their careers, at this stage, what I see from them is a lot of clever movement into space rather than direct dueling with the centre backs. Now, I think that can be really well utilised in the Premier League. I wouldn't be concerned in sort of a league-wide way, but under David Moyes specifically and the way that we play, I would really like our striker to be targeting duels with the centre-backs in exactly the way that you described, seeing Antonio come back in, because he's so keen to attack those centre-backs and be in contact with them. That is what is creating that extra space for players like Kudus and Bowen to thrive. So it's something that I really look for in strikers. And that's why I maybe don't look at those guys so much as really top options for me, unless there's a slight change in how we're going to play. And then if we're going to change how we play, I mentioned this earlier, I would be looking more for a false nine type in that kind of striker, more like someone like Matheus Cunha at Wolves, or Jorginho Rutter at Leeds, players who are going to drop quite far off the front line, receive, turn, and then drive from deeper positions, and then be able to supply your wingers. So I think I tend to skirt around players that often get mentioned a lot as being really good because they're scoring lots of goals, and look more for kind of physically effective players. And Brobbey, like I say, probably falls into both of those camps, which is why he's definitely for me the top target. And Adams is another one worth mentioning because he definitely falls into the more physically dominant category. He's a less effective finisher at this stage, but it's someone that has been on an incredible up curve trajectory in his career, and is definitely worth monitoring because, you know, if there was less money available for an Antonio type of player, he would be suddenly the obvious option in terms of a more cut price deal for someone who'd be physically effective in the front line. If you give me just enough time to mention a wild card, I'd throw Omar Marmoush in as well.
Egypt.
Yeah, this one's a little bit different, and possibly people will be thinking, well, doesn't he fall into more of the sort of evading kind of striker category? And also, he's not like a Cunha or a Rutter in terms of being someone who's going to drop deep and play false nine type of player where they supply from deeper areas. The reason I like Marmoush so much is because he's very young. I think he's got incredible potential. Really like what I've seen from him so far at Eintracht Frankfurt, and also what I've seen of him playing for Egypt. I thought he looked really good in moments at AFCON. And one of the things I really like about the idea of a Marmoush is that he falls into a category more like, I suppose, what Maxwell Cornet was meant to be, where he would be very capable of playing second fiddle to someone like Jarrod Bowen. He would be excellent, actually, as an additional option, as a sort of more direct winger, and then could also be your sort of third choice striker, where he'd be very comfortable playing through the middle as well. And he's more active physically. He's very aggressive, which is something that we all generally like in our strikers, whether it's David Moyes or not. I mean, we all really enjoyed watching Michail Antonio up front, for example, because he was so aggressive. And Marmoush has that. So he's someone I would be looking at as well as a real clear option with a pathway, maybe where you start him more as a winger and then move him through into the middle later on.
It's going to be interesting to see how we deal with it, especially in summer, because I feel like the next couple of months will be instructive. Michail Antonio is sort of given very mixed signals. He's very much says whatever he feels in the moment kind of guy. And so we've heard him say both that he wants to retire at West Ham, and then also that he was essentially angling for a move on a podcast. So like, I feel like it's whatever happens in the next couple of months, we'll see where he's sort of at physically, what happens in terms of form wise. It could be a situation where someone like Marmoush could be an interesting idea because Michail Antonio is still the main guy next year. And then you have someone who, when Antonio is not able to do it for whatever reason, in they come and do something. And obviously we spoke about this. We spoke about this off camera previously, but the age profile of the squad and stuff like that, looking at someone who is significantly younger would be kind of ideal.
Well, it's something that needs to happen in terms of where the squad's at. We desperately need. I mean, the summer's a bit scary, really, because the amount of turnover there's likely to be, and if there's not that much turnover, we're still going to be keeping hold of players that are really well beyond the point that we should be looking at them as reliable contributors in the Premier League. So, and as much as I want to talk about squad development, I probably should also mention when we're saying that how impressive some of those players have been to keep going to this point in their careers. Angelo Ogbonna definitely deserves a shout out, coming back from severe knee injury so late in his career to still be a contributor in European Cup, European and domestic football. So, but yeah, I think it has to be a priority, right? That we bring in at least 2 or 3 players that are below 24 to play serious roles in the squad next season.
There is someone else we've been linked with, of course, in Aruni, the Nottingham Forest striker, but we'll be talking about him on a separate video on the forum channel. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. It'll probably be, I don't know. I'm not gonna lie. I think the title and thumbnail might talk about Paqueta more than it'll talk about him. But click on it. But hear me out. Just click on every single video that comes up, and when you see me and Jack, don't get too disappointed. And then listen, and then we'll talk about Aruni in there. But is there anything else you wanted to cover before we end it?
No, not really. Just that I absolutely love Michail Antonio, and everyone should be just as positive about him. Really, he's been absolutely key to what we've done over the last few years, and I'm not sure that any of it would have happened without him hitting such, honestly, a ridiculous level during lockdown, where he was really seriously recording statistics and data to put him alongside any of the top strikers in Europe. He was right up there for that season, and a little bit beyond that as well.
It's crazy. I as number one Michail Antonio criticizer on this channel for a long time. Can't pass, can't cross, can't shoot was a big thing I kept saying all the time. He's gone full circle. I remember, I'll tell you this story very, very quickly. I remember me and Charlie Donald, Roxborough, subscribe. He's doing music on YouTube. Go check out Charlie. He's a good dude. We went to interview Michail Antonio at some shoe shop in central London once for this channel. You can see the video on the channel somewhere. And when we were leaving, we were talking about Michail Antonio, and we were talking about how much we loved him. And I was like, "Yeah, I just don't like him as a footballer." He was like, "What?" I was like, I've never taken to him. I don't know why. And this was years ago. This was when he was still at wing. This was probably 2018 or something. And now for him to go for that, to be like when he's on the pitch, I'm like, right, here we go. It's a big movement's incoming. I mean, he's wonderful. He's so good to watch. I love him. His podcast, separate issue for a separate time. But hey, subscribe if you're new around here. We appreciate you. Like the video because it helps us out massively. Go follow Jack Elderton on Twitter, analyticsunited.co.uk, not .com, /members. That's the thing you should go check out, as well as the West Ham breakdown on all good podcast platforms, as well as some bad ones.
And you can catch my work in the West Ham program every
the West Ham program.
If you want a breakdown of how the players are doing this season, it's in there every single game.
And then of course Hammerlytics, patreon.com/Hammers Chat. Hammerlytics, myself and Jack, and sometimes Cal with my feeling funky fresh are on there every week talking about the match, not in those terms. I do wish to stress, not in those terms, but yeah, check us out. Thank you for watching, appreciate you all, and we will see you on the forum channel. Click every video you see it. Cheers everyone, bye.